Okay, so let's unpack this. We have a collection of sources here, some old letters, research summaries, official reports, and they all seem to tell one story, but with two drastically different moral outcomes.
They really do.
It's this portrait of the scientific brilliance that birthed modern nuclear medicine, running parallel, almost at the same time, to some of the most profound moral failures in institutional history.
It's a heavy archive to go through, for sure.
Yeah.
Our mission in this deep dive is to explore the birth of radioactive iodine, or RAI, as a life-saving medical tool.
Right.
And then we have to pivot to the accompanying ethical fallout.
Yeah.
The deeply controversial human radiation experiments conducted by some of the very same institutions, MIT, Harvard, and their affiliated hospitals, right in the mid-20th century.
So we're looking at a story of ambition, scientific revolution, and, what feels like institutional betrayal, all woven into the same historical fabric. The sources, they immediately immerse you in this world of just breathtaking innovation. We have to start with the sheer genius of Dr. Saul Hertz. He was the chief of the thyroid unit at Massachusetts General Hospital.
And you have to remember the context here. Hertz graduated from Harvard Medical School, and there were quotas, often for outsiders.
Right.
But he becomes the person who truly pioneered the medical uses of artificially produced radionuclides. He's now, and rightfully so, known as the father of theranostics.
And that term theranostics, that's crucial, isn't it, for understanding his lasting impact?
It is. It's a combination of therapy and diagnostics. So Hertz's fundamental breakthrough wasn't just about treating a disease. It was about using these radioactive substances to both diagnose where the problem is and then, in higher doses, treat it in a very, very targeted way.
Absolutely. His work basically established the gold standard. But the initial spark for this monumental field, it came from an almost spontaneous spur-of-the-moment question back in November 1936.
Yeah, the story is that Hertz attended a lecture by the MIT president, Dr. Carl Compton.
And afterward, he just goes up and asks the foundational question, could iodine be made radioactive artificially?
And Compton confirmed it was possible in writing just a month later. That simple exchange established this essential collaboration. You had Hertz, the clinician at MGH, who needed a way to produce the isotopes.
And he needed Dr. Arthur Roberts, a physicist at the MIT cyclotron, to actually make them.
Exactly. It shows this immediate convergence of physics and medicine. You needed both to unlock the atomic age for, human benefit.
And the results were almost immediate and extremely encouraging. Late in 1937, they ran their first animal studies on 48 rabbits.
Right. They used iodine-128, a tracer isotope, and they demonstrated the core principle that changed everything. The normal thyroid gland concentrated the iodine.
But a hyperplastic thyroid gland, so one that was diseased or overactive, it took up even more.
The sources call this a giant step for nuclear medicine, and that's not an exaggeration.
Not at all.
They had found the perfect biological homing device for treating thyroid disease.
So the breakthrough quickly moves into the clinic. By early 1941, Hertz is administering the first therapeutic treatment using RAI produced by the MIT Markle cyclotron.
And he successfully treats a whole series of 29 patients, all suffering from hyperthyroidism, Graves' disease.
He took the idea from a spontaneous question to a curative application in less than 5 years. It's just incredible.
It truly redefined medical physics.
But this is where the narrative of brilliance takes a sharp and, frankly, a brutal turn into human ego and ambition.
Yeah.
The materials we have, particularly the searing 1991 letter from Dr. Arthur Roberts, detail a vicious, decades-long dispute over who deserved the credit.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because this wasn't some polite disagreement among colleagues.
Not at all.
Roberts' letter is an indictment. It's about institutional politics, the erasure of history. He asserts decades later that Hertz, and Hertz alone, conceived and carried out the groundbreaking clinical work. He says Hertz led the project for the next 7 years. And he just dismisses the idea that anyone else led the team as simple, naive, and absurd.
Wow.
What's so fascinating is that these sources reveal the brutal reality of credit and legacy in science, especially when a pioneer is sidelined or dies young.
Which is exactly what happened to Hertz. He had a heart attack at only 45 in 1950. He wasn't there to defend his own history against these powerful people with institutional backing.
And Roberts is fearless in this letter. He names the people he believed stole that credit.
He focuses his accusations heavily on a man named Robert Day Evans.
Evans was Roberts' first boss after NYU, and Roberts paints him as, well, nothing short of a villain. He calls him an unprincipled racist manipulator who contributed no actual scientific work.
So Roberts' argument is that Evans was just a manager.
Purely managerial. Yes, he secured the funds for the MIT cyclotron, which was crucial. But Roberts insists Evans had not the slightest contribution to the scientific process of using the radioiodine itself.
It's so strong that he says Evans' name was actually omitted from the first draft of the seminal paper.
It was. The drama is just palpable when you read it.
Yeah.
Roberts explains that Evans made his participation conditional on his name appearing on all the papers.
And Roberts admits he later regretted accepting that condition because it diminished the recognition that was due to Ertz.
It really highlights a system where financial control and, institutional power could just overshadow the actual science. The reward for Evans' work, his salary doubled. Meanwhile, the physicist doing the fundamental work felt robbed.
And the venom in that letter isn't just for Evans, is it?
No, he also targets Earl Chapman. Chapman took over Hertz's patients after Hertz served in the Navy during World War II.
And after Hertz passed away, Chapman, according to other letters, was accused of being a well-known anti-Semite who took full credit for Hertz's legacy.
So this race for this revolutionary discovery was just. It was tainted by bitterness and alleged betrayal almost from the start.
Roberts even, decades later, tries to correct the record for a 1976 award. He suggests a breakdown. Hertz gets 80%, he gets 15%, and then just 5% is split between the others.
This deep dive into the correspondence, it just reveals this high-stakes ecosystem where the pursuit of glory was relentless, and this immense pressure to be first, to get funding, the struggle for dominance. That's perhaps the critical piece that connects the pioneering science to the moral failures.
That's a powerful point. If institutions were willing to betray their own scientists over credit, what were they willing to do to vulnerable subjects when the goal was even bigger?
And that's the transition we have to make now.
We have to move from the brilliance and betrayal over credit to the institutional disregard for basic human rights in applying this new nuclear knowledge.
The moral vacuum that existed right alongside it.
So after World War II, there was this profound governmental military push to understand the effects of internal radiation exposure.
Right. How to treat it, how to survive a nuclear war. This imperative led directly to human testing. And not just on consenting adults. They needed to study how these tracers moved through the human body, and they chose the most vulnerable population they could find.
Which brings us directly to the infamous Fernald experiments. These ran from 1946 to 1953. The location was the Fernald State School in Waltham, Massachusetts.
And this wasn't a typical school. It was originally conceived as a facility for feeble-minded children. Many of these subjects were wards of the state. They had no family to protect them, no capacity to consent.
And it wasn't just a clinical study. The sources show this collaboration, the Harvard-MIT joint experiment, was partly funded by a huge corporation, Quaker Oats.
Yeah, the commercial interest was to test whether certain chemicals in oatmeal, phytates, interfered with calcium and iron absorption. Quaker Oats wanted to use that knowledge for advertising.
It's just genuinely shocking to realize that this institutional collaboration involving two world-renowned universities was mixing government-funded radiation research with corporate marketing efforts, and all on the backs of disabled children.
The method was chillingly simple. Over 200 male youths were fed oatmeal and milk. But the crucial detail, of course, is that the food was spiked with radioactive iron and calcium tracers.
And we also learned from the sources that other cereals had various levels of other radioactive substances, things like uranium, thorium, cobalt.
They were ingesting these materials as part of their daily meals.
What's truly disturbing is the system they used to lure these children into what they called the science club.
These were vulnerable kids, often poor, and they were allegedly tempted with additional privileges.
Which included extra meals, a huge incentive at the time, parties, and trips to see the Boston Red Sox. A Red Sox ticket was the price of nuclear experimentation.
The failure of informed consent here is the core ethical failure. The sources reveal the letters that were sent to the parents. They mentioned a special diet rich in cereals and iron and blood tests.
They made it sound like this great nutritional study.
Exactly. But the letters intentionally did not mention the radioactive tracers being administered in the oatmeal. The researchers knowingly concealed the truth. They exploited a population that was just incapable of standing up for themselves.
The defense offered later was that the radiation dose was small, an average of 230 millirems. They argued it was like getting 30 chest x-rays.
But that misses the point, doesn't it?
Completely. The point isn't the quantifiable long-term physical damage, it's the profound moral damage of the act itself. This wasn't treatment. This was research disguised as charity.
And if you needed more proof that institutional hubris had totally eclipsed any ethical concern, the sources point to a separate but related set of experiments at the Rentham State School.
This happened later, in 1961 and into the 60s.
Yes. 70 more mentally disabled children were given small doses of radioactive iodine.
This raises a big question. What was the specific motivation for the Rentham study? I mean, it seems even more extreme than a nutritional test.
It was directly tied to the Cold War, the fear of a nuclear attack. This experiment, funded by the U.S. Public Health Service, was designed to test a proposed countermeasure non-radioactive iodine for blocking the uptake of radioactive iodine released in a nuclear explosion.
So they were using disabled children to test treatments for nuclear fallout.
That's what it was, yes.
The idea that researchers felt they needed to prioritize studying a theoretical threat over the immediate safety and consent of children in their care is. It's just chilling. The drive for necessary knowledge just overrode every moral checkpoint.
Absolutely. And the documents show these experiments stayed secret for decades. They only became public knowledge during a 1994 Senate hearing.
And once it was out, the exposure was swift and severe.
It was. The accountability phase saw major institutional figures stepping forward. MIT's president, Charles Vest, apologized in 1994.
And President Clinton issued a formal apology in 1995, acknowledging that the government had indirectly sponsored these experiments through contracts with MIT.
The legal resolution provided some measure of closure. In 1998, MIT and Quaker Oats agreed to pay $1.85 million to former Fernald residents who were involved.
It's a formal, tangible acknowledgement of the profound wrongdoing.
It is.
So, what does this all mean when we put the two narratives together? On one hand, you have Dr. Hertz, whose genius unlocked RAI, a life-saving therapy that is still a gold standard today. On the other, you have the exact same institutional ecosystem using these substances for highly questionable research on the most vulnerable among us.
The sources show us that revolutionary technology, born from hard work and brilliance, was simultaneously co-opted and utilized by ambition and a staggering disregard for basic human rights. That internal fight for credit details so viciously in Robert's letter. It suggests an atmosphere of intense competition that seems to have just blinded these elite organizations to any ethical boundaries.
It's a fundamental contradiction. We rely on these great institutions for scientific advancement, yet the history of nuclear medicine is tied to both the cyclotron that produced the cure and the idea of luring disabled kids with baseball games to conduct dangerous experiments. It's this dual legacy of light and shadow that we have to acknowledge.
Which raises an important question for you, the listener. When we celebrate the atomic age of medicine, these targeted therapies that save countless lives, how much of that initial success was built on a foundation of profound moral compromise? The sources reveal this immense pressure to gain knowledge about internal radiation.
So knowing the incredible risks involved, just consider the depth of institutional motivation or maybe the immense Cold War pressure that led researchers to prioritize studying a theoretical nuclear threat over the basic well-being of the children legally entrusted to their care. It leaves you wondering, what other necessary knowledge was gained at such an utterly unacceptable human cost?